We are pleased to be joined by our good friend, Dr. Reggie Caudell, who is the Dean of the Martin Tuchman School of Management at the great New Jersey Institute of Technology. Good to see you, Dean.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I have to always disclose these things. I have taught at NJIT and know the school well. And on March the 3rd, 2016, that was when, in fact, the Martin Tuchman School was named, right?
Right. Oh, what a fantastic day. It
was a big day. Tell everyone who Martin Tuchman is and why it matters.
Well, Martin Tuchman is one of our graduates. In 1961, he graduated in mechanical engineering. But he went on, he's an innovator, he's an entrepreneur, and he just revolutionized the container freight industry. So he's a really business focused. So he's technology oriented, but business focused, and just a tremendous asset to us.
And on that day, it wasn't just a naming ceremony, but that day we also had a terrific panel discussion that I was honored to moderate with other business leaders who are connected to the School of Management. And we talked about the changing role of business schools and how your School of Management, what the philosophy of it. Why don't you do this? Describe what the philosophy is and the changing world of business.
Okay, great. Yeah, start with the world of business and how it has changed. Technologies are just across the board, integrated into what's happening in business. And we have to make changes in the way that we actually educate the next generation of business leaders. And with these technologies, it not only affects how you operate, but the data and the information that you need in order to operate a successful business today.
What do you mean the data?
Data
Give me an
is,
example.
Example is just information that comes about through any source, but for example, your cell phone, and communicating, and media systems. It's the way that companies operate and their supply chain and information from their supply chain. Where are those products that you just purchased? When are they going to get into your store? How do you know that they're the right color, the right mix, in order to satisfy your customers' demand?
Absolutely.
So it really requires that you look at how you operate, and the data that's required to do that is just growing phenomenally.
You know, Dean, one of the issues that came up that I found so fascinating, you're talking about technology, but we got into this whole discussion in the panel back and forth that you're talking about technology, and I sat there and I said, as someone who thinks about communication, that it must be harder to engage millennials, if you will, who are sitting there, you know, and then you're looking at pictures from that day, they're sitting there with their iPhones and handheld devices, and you're talking about technology, but then again, I said face-to-face communication was so important. You're saying, hey, wait a minute, they're not mutually exclusive. Talk about that.
Oh, yeah. We could talk about the advances in technology and how important that is, but it's still the people skills, the communication skills, the leadership that really still makes a difference in business. And one thing that's happening with technologies, I'm not really sure that we're catching up with where the technology is. I'm not sure that we've learned yet quite how to use that technology efficiently.
Well, what does that mean?
Well, that means that the way that we communicate, especially the millennials, they're looking at efficiency and the way that they communicate very rapidly with their friends. It's quite different, though, when you get into the business world, and you have to communicate with those that are not necessarily right there with you at that same level, because you need to cross these boundaries. And it's not only boundaries associated with technologies and boundaries associated with disciplines, but it's also differences in the way that just people think and learn and want to communicate.
Reggie, what's so fascinating is that in business and in a School of Management, you have to teach this as well. If we're talking about team building and face-to-face communication, is it challenging? Do you think it's more challenging for certain people, younger people who are communicating so quickly, text messages, email, to get together face-to-face?
Oh, absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. You know, there are just so many examples where you end up having to cross disciplines. So it's that communication skill across those disciplines.
So hold on, back up. Engineers with?
Engineers with business people, with managers, with computer scientists, all of them speak a slightly different language. And so one of the keys, I think, to the future is to be able to have one foot firmly in one domain, but be able to communicate to others in the group, in the team, because there's no problem that can be addressed without it really requiring a team effort to make that happen.
So how would your school deal with that?
It's a difficult problem to deal with, but what we're doing is we are working with the computer science programs and engineering in order to really bring engineers into the business side as well as allowing our business and management students to participate with the computer scientists and engineers.
And that day, before we let you out of here, Reggie, you were also talking about creating real life, I don't want to know if I want to call them case studies or real life challenges that force people to solve problems together, right?
Right, right. We're building teams where they're developing new products. And so you have to have people on the technical side to understand the right solution. But you also have to have people on managers' side in order to understand whether or not it's economically viable and how to really produce it in a way that's economic.
It's so interesting. People think an MBA, they think they know what it is. It's finance, it's management. It's much more, right?
Oh, yeah, it's much more. It's leadership, and that ability to communicate is one very important part of it. Also, you have to be technical. Any field inside of the business world today, you have to have an understanding of the analytics that are required and also the technologies that are in that field.
How about the marketing and communication? We've talked about that.
Oh, probably the most sophisticated field for business because it deals with huge data sets. You're trying to understand what your customer wants before your customer even knows what they want.
And the conversations you and I have had about leadership, right?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Yeah. You can't get along in this world without that. You have to have that differentiator in order to be successful. And for those people who have the business skills, who have that technical knowledge, but also have that ability to lead and to understand how to put teams together and make them execute.
That's what it's going to take.
That's the solution.
And that's what we're going to be teaching at the Martin Tuchman School of Management at NJIT, otherwise known as the New Jersey Institute of Technology. Our good friend, Dr. Reggie Caudill, I want to thank you for joining us and talking about the School of Management, NJIT. Thank you, Reggie. Good
My
stuff.
pleasure, Steve.
The preceding program has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence, and 13 for WNET, NJTV, and WHYY. Funding for this edition of Caucus New Jersey has been provided by Health Republic Insurance of New Jersey, the New Jersey Education Association, Wells Fargo, Holy Name Medical Center, the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, MD Advantage, and by NJ Best. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area. Caucus New Jersey has been produced in partnership with TriStar Studios.
Fixing America's crumbling infrastructure. The nation's roads, bridges, airports, and railways are in such a state of disrepair. The American Society of Civil Engineers estimates the U.S. would need to invest some $4.5 trillion by 2025 to improve them. Where can we come up with that kind of money? The co-founder of one of the nation's leading container leasing corporations has an idea. Martin Tuchman's proposal: cut the tax rate on U.S. companies repatriating profit from overseas from the current 35% to 5%, but require them to use 25% of that cash to buy municipal bonds from states. Joining us now for more on his plan, co-founder of Interpool, chairman and CEO of the Tuchman Group, Martin Tuchman is here. Martin, thanks for being here this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
So do you think that companies would be on board with your plan?
Well, I think they would. We did this once before. In about 12 years ago, there was a Jobs Creation Act, and there was a one-year window where those companies that had money offshore could repatriate the money and only pay 5.25%. We were one of the companies that did that. We brought over about $300 million at that time. It was a lot of money for us at that time. And so we know it works as far as getting corporations to sign on. The problem last time was not everybody abided by the so-called rules. They did not put the money back into the infrastructure. They didn't create jobs. They paid dividends, did stock buyback programs, all the wrong things that you would want to do to sell a repatriation program. The difference this time, I believe, you still go along with the 5.25%, but you mandate that 25% be for municipal bonds. And this places the decision in the hands of the governors of the states, because they're the ones that are running the states. They're the CEOs, and they have the discretion to invest that money into the projects that are necessary.
It's an interesting plan, Martin, and a well-thought-out one. Does it imply skepticism over the Trump administration's $1 trillion infrastructure plan, which would have around $200 billion from federal monies, $800 billion from states, municipalities, and private investors. It just, if you reference Wilbur Ross's October 2016 comments, in order to fund these projects, you need to ensure investors that you're going to have repeatable revenue, cash flow to meet your debt obligation, as well as supply dividend to the equity.
Yes, well, I agree that there's a lot of plans floating around. The one thing we have to keep in mind is that if there is, in fact, $2 trillion that gets repatriated, under this plan, $500 billion would go into the rebuilding the infrastructure, also creating jobs. You have to remember, infrastructure is not something that can be outsourced. It has to be done in the United States. And the jobs that will be created will be good jobs. Engineers, construction workers, electricians, teamsters. It's, in my opinion, will be very much supported by the unions and the workers.
So you mentioned, oh, excuse me,
go ahead, Steve. Go.
You mentioned municipal bonds. How do you make sure the governors don't use that money to fund pension funds, pay back bills like in Illinois? They need money for everything. Why would it go for infrastructure? It hasn't for the last 10, 20 years. Why would they change now?
Well, you would have to mandate it. Of course, you know, like people say, the devil's in the details. But you would have to mandate it that these funds could only go for infrastructure. You could put a pretty good team together of union operators and industrial people to oversee this.
So, Martin, when we talk about just how bad things have gotten as to why we're having this discussion about how to address the problem, here this morning, the cover of the New York Post, welcome to hell. Here in New York City, it's the day commuters have been dreading the massive summer repair project at the nation's busiest train station, Pennsylvania Station, otherwise Penn Station, kicks off what New York's governor has called the summer of hell for commuters across the region. Is this symptomatic, Martin, of the transit problems that we're seeing nationwide?
You cannot continue to ignore rebuilding the infrastructure. If you have a roof on your house, you can patch it for just so long. It eventually has to be replaced. And we have been ignoring the infrastructure for a very long time. And everything is coming together now. It's perfect. Interest rates are very low. This is the time to invest in the infrastructure.
It seems the way to get legislators' attention is when it affects their constituents, and the constituents then see them at town halls and say this is an issue. One of the things that's so interesting about this American Society of Civil Engineers report is it says that from 2016 to 2025, each household will lose $3,400 each year in disposable income due to infrastructure deficiencies. And that's because when there are those infrastructure deficiencies, things like surface infrastructure, surface transportation problems, businesses end up passing those costs on to consumers, right? So with tax reform seeming to be stalling right now behind healthcare reform, what other ideas do you have to sort of get some of these infrastructure projects started? Where else could those funds come from?
Well, $500 billion is a lot of money to get started with, get you going. What you have to remember is that a good portion of the overall infrastructure investment is in wages and salaries. Those salaries get taxed. So the taxes come into the states and the federal government as a result of creating these jobs. And obviously people with jobs buy things, create an entire bootstrap operation to get the economy going in good paying jobs. And I think that's essential.
One of the ideas that's been floated is what they call asset recycling, where you take an existing asset like Indiana did with their own turnpike, use that because it has a revenue stream that can be used for things that aren't going to pay for themselves, like a lot of the transit systems we have in this area. Port Authority, you can extract upwards of $47 billion to pay for that $25 billion gateway project. Are those ideas beginning to percolate, using existing assets as a way to leverage?
I believe so, yes. Anything you can do to generate revenue is going to be very friendly to
well, it's a sensible idea, and Leah mentioned the pressure on the consumer, but if you look at the consumer doesn't want to pay tolls. The same report that we've been referencing cites that of the 614,000 bridges in the United States, 40% are past their 50-year intended window. but you don't want to push the imposition onto the consumer to stick out a $5 bill or a $10 bill every time he or she goes to work in the morning.
No,
So these ideas are sensible.
Easy pass like credit cards. You don't feel the pain.
You don't feel like you're using it.
Exactly. All right, good stuff. Martin Tuchman, thanks for presenting your plan here.
Thank you very much.
These 40-foot-long repurposed shipping containers are smack in the middle of the Astoria houses. Now, they're temporary medical care units. The purpose is to reach as many people in underserved communities as possible, and it's all free. Congressman Carolyn Maloney says these used shipping containers that used to move cargo, she hopes, will now move families to action and protect themselves against COVID.
Mr. Tuchman, do you want to tell us about what this is and how you did it?
Yeah, well, these are standard containers that are used all over the world to ship goods. We're repurposing these containers to make hospital rooms out of it.
This container is going to provide COVID testing and vaccinations. The floating hospital will be here.
Just want to say thank you that this finally has come where they are finally paying attention to our neighborhood.
I want to thank Mr. Tuchman for his generosity in bringing this to us. We hope this is just the beginning because we believe that this is going to not just change people's lives, but as the Congressman said, save people's lives.
Thank you so much for coming today. As many of you may know, this is our fourth installation. There are currently 25 million of these containers throughout the world. I very much appreciate your allowing me to install a few of them on your property. Thank you.
This will absolutely save lives. It's a very underserved area where people don't have access to vaccinations or to testing. And in COVID, we saw really the injustice that some neighborhoods had with not access to quality care.